किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके हो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है। किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे लो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके हो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है। माना अपनी जेब से फकीर है, फिर भी यारो दिल में हम अमीर है। माना अपनी जेब से फकीर है, फिर भी यारो दिल में हम अमीर है। किसी पे पिट जाएगी वो जिंदगी, चले बाहर के लिए वो जिंदगी, किसी को हो न हो हमें तो एतबार, जीना इसी का नाम है। किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके हो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है। Well, Kamal, you're an absolute rock star. But it's so wonderful to have you here in Delhi, because in Gurgaon, because I know you're based in Bangalore. And for those of you who haven't met Kamal before, he's also the co-founder of XPheno, which is a specialist staffing company. And what really intrigued me was an article that Kamal wrote recently in the Hindu Business Line, where he spoke really about job losses and layoffs, which is a very hot topic right now. And I said, Kamal, if you're going to be in Gurgaon, we need to have a conversation. So great, Kamal. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Thomas, for having me here. And for all the Mukesh fans, no offense, I'm not supposed to sing or dance outside my bathroom. I did that today thanks to Thomas. Yeah. And let's get on with the conversation and make peace with layoffs.
Right, absolutely. So, Kamal, let's have a seat and continue with our conversation.
Sure.
So, Kamal, as you know, I think your article was really, inspired me to have this conversation with you. I think just as a context setting, we've seen a huge amount of layoffs happening over the past 1 year. In markets like the US, we've had more than 300,000 layoffs. India is also catching up. Of course, if you just look at startups, I think there've been more than 16,500 of them across about 50 odd companies. And almost every day we're reading about some layoffs. So, for instance, even in today's economic times, it talks about a layoff by Swiggy and Vedantu and so on. It's pretty much a common occurrence in the newspaper every day. And what I'm also seeing in social media really is that people are saying that, look, is this really poor leadership? And a lack of strategic vision that leaders have, and is it also and that's really one aspect. The other aspect is that there's been so much of funding that has come into startups in the last couple of years, and have they really gone on a very accelerated drive to hire people, and is it now really a short-term strategy for them to start laying off people? So, I mean, is that a fair observation by people, or do you think there is much more to that?
In my view, Thomas, people are overreacting.
Okay.
See, I looked at the numbers you said, close to 17,000 people in
Yeah.
startup companies have been laid off. I was looking at the November jobs report, and I saw that at least 14,000 jobs are open in startups, actively hiring.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we can also look at the context of there is a friction of skill, location, salary, and most importantly, timing. The openings could be at one place and maybe the skills are in a different place.
Right.
It's all real. But sometimes when you look at the numbers of people getting laid off, some company got a funding of $78 million 6 months ago and laying off 40 people. If you look at it, I think we are using new reasons to get PR nowadays.
Yeah.
Because a company which has thousands of people, I think they have their own natural attrition, which should take care of the cost benefits they need when they lay off people.
Right.
But I also think they're all making a statement. They're making a statement not only to the people who are leaving,
Yeah.
they're making a statement to their own employees.
Yes.
They are forced to make a statement to their investors.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are all people like you and me who are reading and they're telling us also something.
Right.
So my own sense of this entire layoff is, yes, it's real. There are economic reasons for which they're doing, but also they're trying to oblige to somebody else is what it looks like by the way of communication. If 40 people are leaving, why are you taking the mic and telling the press that, my people are leaving? Because you have an attrition of, all these startups have attrition of 25-30%.
Right.
So I think there is a bit of an optics involved beyond the reality of just letting people go.
Right. Yeah, but having said that, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the leadership aspect of organizations, because we all know that organizations go through a certain growth cycle. So if you take startups, in the early stages, when they get some funding, there is a lot of accelerated growth. They might grow 3 times in maybe 1 or 2 years, and then they reach, and then there's a lot of hiring which happens. They hire salespeople, product people, and marketing people, and so on. And then, after that, you got the early adopters and so on going, then competition surfaces. So things tend to slow down, right? And obviously there is a fair amount of, you relook at your organization. And then a lot of organizations sometimes go and hit a wall, right? I mean, because then it's difficult to grow beyond a certain point, right? So is it there? And then that's when they start, shedding resources and so on. So do you feel that it could be there is a leadership and strategy angle to all this? Because I mean, obviously companies know that they go through the cycle, so can't they plan better?
No, absolutely. Even more in the Indian context, I think it is a question of leadership and the persona of the leader.
Yeah.
My sense is that there are organization mandates, there are economic realities that you need to cut costs, because they don't see a demand coming in, and if you ask me honestly, many companies in India have overhired post-pandemic pent-up demand. When it came, people overhired. And I think they're trying to correct it. And if you ask any company, all of us have one kind of a flab or other somewhere. And I think these are times, opportunities people take to cut it, in the name of recession, in the name of, I think, the harsh realities that we are going to face kind of stuff. But I agree with you that it is leadership and the persona of leadership as to what they want to communicate.
Right.
If you look at the template of Airbnb branches, it stands out as to they laid off and everybody really appreciated them. God's sake, they actually let go people. But how they let go created the persona of branches. I think for more than creating Airbnb, in my head, he is more remembered for how well he let go people.
Right. Yeah, but talking, just staying on this leadership angle. So, for instance, the other reason why a lot of layoffs happen is also because of wrong acquisitions. We've seen Microsoft acquisition of Nokia. There was Oracle, which acquired Cerner. All big acquisitions, and then they figured out that these acquisitions were not really going anywhere, and so then they shut it down or sold off the company. And again, a lot of layoffs. Again, to my mind, poor strategic vision in terms of doing acquisitions, and a lot of companies also do ad hoc layoffs. So let me give you some example. Many years ago, when I was in my corporate job, globally we had some economic headwinds, and they had to but then they said that we will cut 10% of the jobs across the board, across the whole world, right? So even in India, where things were going fine, we had to cut people because just to show our support, right? So I think it sometimes that is also a cultural thing. With some of these organizations. But having said that, in your article, and I have that right in front of me, Kamal, you also asked the question, what is wrong with layoffs, right? And that's a very valid question, and you did touch upon that in the earlier part of our conversation. But what do you think great companies do when actually faced with a slowdown?
See, in my view, great companies communicate better. That is the core of all the heartburn that we are saying today, or sort of putting it out in social media, is purely because of how it was done versus why it was done. I think how is where the problem is. If you look at the largest retrenchments that has happened in the history, and so has been done by some of the marquee brands, IBM, AT&T, General Motors, thousands of people they were laid off. They are still great places to work. People still join those companies. I think the point here is about how some of these communications have happened. We all know the famous example of firing people on Zoom, being inconsiderate of laying off people today and weeping in front of employees, then signing up a large brand ambassador, paying millions of dollars. I think that is where people are calling it out and feeling that, is this who you are? And I think the how part is where the great companies are different than anybody else who's purely looking at it as a number. I think that's what people are asking. Can we deal with it better?
Yeah. So one is the how, which is can they communicate better and so on. The other is, to my mind, is also, I think, linked to how have they thought this through more strategically. So for instance, in a downturn, I mean, do the leaders have a growth mindset as well? Are they looking at being more innovative in terms of their product portfolio, in terms of how they can secure revenue with their existing customers, how they can build more recurring revenue models? Because ultimately it's when the revenue goes down that people face this pressure. Either revenue goes down or you're doing a significant transformation, right? But I think in most cases, particularly in these times, it's around, there is revenue pressure because you're not getting the growth. And I also feel that a lot of leadership teams are under a lot of pressure from investors to make those quick short-term cuts, right? I mean, so they say we need to cut operation losses quickly, and that leads to some of these challenges. But having said that, recently in the Economic Times, I was reading an article that said that in India, 6 out of 10 professionals actually worry about a potential job loss, and that is leading to anxiety and stress levels and all kinds of challenges of that kind. So what do you think should be the responsibility of organizations to their employees in these circumstances?
See, I've been in a situation where before getting fired, I left a company, and it felt like I got fired, in my first job. I just got out of the company before I thought my boss would fire me,
Yeah.
It had a 6-month impact on me. It had an impact. Next 3 months, I didn't get a job. I had to take care of family. And the next 3 months after being in that job, it was on my head. I woke up every day and said, this might happen here too.
Yeah.
Though I work for a wonderful company next up, but it stayed in me. And I think through that. And every time I work for a large company, I always thought this was coming. This was coming for whatever reason. And there were times when I once was responsible to lay off about 10% of my staff.
Right.
And I was telling my leaders that, look, it's not required because we have attrition, we can adjust it. Can we do it away? Because the scar in me of the past, though the scar was 18 years old, I was telling me that we can do this better. We can do this better because I'm going to impact people. And there were people who sat in front of me saying, Kamal, do we really need to do it this way?
Correct.
Can you at least keep my job, my role?
Yeah.
And I think it was about my voice. I think in certain roles we are as leaders, we all keep our jobs, let go somebody else's jobs, we're being really hypocrites, or we don't have a standing in that company, and like you said, we are following a global template, global mandate, and trying to keep our job and let go somebody else's. So I think it is about how well you can empathize with the context of it. I wish every leader somehow in his life or her life gets fired once, that they understand what it is to let go people. I think many of us really don't know what it is to get fired.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, during the pandemic, I think organizations did a wonderful job because, health was the primary concern. And I think organizations across the board did a fantastic job of really looking after their employees. So health of employees is something very recent and fresh in everybody's memory. Now, the pandemic is, more or less behind us, but now this job insecurity has become, and actually during the pandemic, a lot of companies did a great job of retaining employees as well. I think, some people had to let go, but I think a lot of people had that empathy and, concern for their employees, and they retained a lot of their workforce. Now, post-pandemic, when due to the economic headwinds and now job losses are happening, there's the mental health challenge, right? So the other was the COVID-related health, but now there is the mental health, which is, I think, far more, there are a lot more issues around it because it's more long-term and it leaves scars and things of that kind. So I think organizations are in that mode where they can look after the health of their employees, but maybe they need to be far more sensitive now in this current scenario, keeping in mind the mental health of their organizations, of their employees as well.
No,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the situation when COVID came to now, if you ask me, the situation is far more I would say, conducive to keep your employees.
Right.
Because when COVID came, we didn't know when it's going to get over and when the demand will come back. But clearly now we know the cycle that possibly in a year's time we're going to have one more pent-up demand. Because then we didn't know whether we'll get a vaccine, when we're going to get out of our house. There's so much of real unknown anxiety.
Right.
If you ask me now, having seen 9/11, having seen GFC, and even now COVID, I think if 2024 is a year when we're going to get pent-up demand again, what prevents from companies to be a little more empathetic to their employees is what I keep wondering.
No, absolutely. And you've written in your article that in the next quarter there is going to be again an uptick, in terms of hiring. So actually, companies need to be a little more patient, right? But having said that, I think given this overall sense of insecurity that employees, have probably got in this particular phase, therefore there is a strong possibility that increasingly employees will take to doing side gigs and moonlighting, right? That's a very strong possibility. So how do you see that panning out?
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so. If you are, let's say, more anxious and you would do a side gig, you're going to make your job more insecure than it was before.
Yeah.
So if you look at when moonlighting happened not because people were feeling insecure and they were being paid less or whatever. They got more opportunities and they found a way to cheat.
Right.
And that's how moonlighting happened.
Right.
Now, in the situation that you're going to be, let's say if the demand is going to be less for new jobs, and you're going to throw away what you already have because the employers have now figured out how to catch you.
Yeah.
Right? And you still want to throw it away because you feel that you're going to fail or you're going to be more insecure because you're going to lose your job. You're going to be really foolish.
Yeah. So I think perhaps moonlighting is the wrong word to use because it has a lot of negative connotation. But I meant doing a side gig which doesn't really interfere with your day job, with your regular 9 to 6 job. And I think a lot of people are probably building a whole lot of new skills because, for instance, I was reading yesterday that there's going to be a demand next year for 100,000 drone pilots in India. Right, so that's a whole new set of skills that people will require to become drone pilots, right? As an example, so I think there are opportunities now for people to learn new things, maybe pick up some new skills, and start doing some side gigs to ensure that financially they're secure and it doesn't conflict with your core job, right? And therefore, maybe organizations also will probably now need to start formulating some policies around allowing their employees to do side gigs as long as they don't work with a competitor and it doesn't really interfere with their day job and so on and so forth. That's one thing. Second thing is that it's quite possible that organizations themselves may start wanting to hire more freelancers, right? I mean, when I talk to a lot of people, they say that, look, we only want full-time because we believe that in all these roles you need full-time people, right? Or you need people who are on a full-time contract. But I think increasingly a lot of young people may not want to do a full-time job, right? A lot of people may actually say that, look, I just would like to do multiple gigs, right? So it's quite possible that all this as well might give a boost to this entire gig economy. That's just a thought that I have, right?
I don't know. I think this gig thing, in my view, is a little overhyped, because people want the life of a poet and the pay of a banker. I don't think that happens, and you ask everybody who's a freelancer, they're actually looking for, is this secure enough for me when I will get my next gig? You look at all the reactions of freelancers and we deploy a few for ourselves and they're not very sure of their next income. But people who think it could be a great thing, but for you to be a freelancer, you need to be super skilled. For you to find a gig every time one gig ends to another, right? So I think from an organization point of view, definitely I see the flexibility they want. They're looking at different kinds of workforce. Now the workforce blend today is going to be full-time employees, full-time contract employees, freelancers, interns, and service providers. These are all the things that is coming together in tomorrow's world. I think there'll be more freelancers, but I think for the productivity we have as a country, I really don't know, how many people can really freelance and do justice. We need so much supervision to be productive in our own employer place, today. So it is growing, and definitely the share of freelance is growing, but I wouldn't romanticize too much on freelancers. We still have a long way to go.
So the other thing you mentioned in your article is you say it's time we made peace with the cyclicity of the hiring boom and retrenchment drives, which is, I think, very interesting comment that you make. But is that really possible for people who have been affected?
It's not possible.
Right.
The problem is that you are not employing a full stack engineer or a data analyst.
Yeah.
You are employing a son, a brother,
Yeah.
a husband,
Yeah.
a son-in-law,
Yeah.
a neighbor, a friend. These are your employees. So they
Correct,
have to
correct,
go and tell
Yeah.
somebody what they are. The title we provide, the salary we give, the brand people work for are all for their ecosystem of
Right.
friends, relatives, enemies,
Yeah,
classmates, everybody together.
Yeah.
And that is where your real employee is.
Yes.
And there, the psychological impact is higher as to what do I tell these guys.
Right.
And as you know, in at least in our society, if you lose a job, it's looked like you've done something wrong.
Right.
It's like, just we have the same impression that we had when school, that if teacher ne mara hoga to tumne kuch kiya hai types, right? So that is the same mentality we carry at work too. And that is the taboo that we need to get rid of.
Yeah.
Because it's the same set of employees who jumped jobs for 100%, to ghosted because they had multiple options. Right. So we took the upside of 100% offers.
Right.
The downside of the winter is that we also possibly need to make peace with losing jobs. And I think it's for everyone who's entering the workforce now. We're going to have 10, 15 kind of, at least 15, 20 gigs by the time we end a job.
Yeah.
It's quite likely we lose 2 or 3.
Correct.
And I think we need to start making peace that we are likely to lose a job somewhere, not because of us, but because of the context.
Yeah, correct. But I think linked to this also could be an increased activity around, employee activism. I think there's a lot of talk about it in markets like the US. I was reading recently that some of the large Indian IT services firms, their staff, their employees in markets like Europe have got unionized and so on. So I think there could be a lot of other spin-offs to all this that people are experiencing in the overall ecosystem as well. Is also an observation that I have. Well, time will tell, but we are seeing a lot of that in the US. Class action suits have started in the US thanks to some of these massive retrenchment drives and so on. So there are all kinds of other possibilities that we are opening ourselves to, thanks to all these changes as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think employee activism has increased, but I think India also has been a land of opportunities where employees simply don't have the time to possibly spend time on fighting your employer unless somebody has really felt that they've been cornered and there's no other place to go. And there's an opportunity to win over their employer financially. That's the only time I think employees the opportunities in India is so much. Like I said, if you have so many jobs that, and everybody who got laid out from these companies is not on the street. I can tell you they're highly skilled people, they're highly paid, and they, in my view, all the numbers that you put out from Economic Times, they possibly must have already got jobs or attending interviews. Otherwise, the streets would be on fire. These are highly skilled people. I wouldn't worry about any of these guys who laid off, except for the psychological scar they might have got of having the sense of rejection. They're all placeable. They would have possibly all got jobs by now.
Yeah, I think the spin to that is that perhaps it would equalize salaries a bit more than the last 1 year. It might equalize, and I think it gives the opportunity for people who are hiring to have a larger pool, because there was a huge shortage of talent, and I think a lot of people were struggling, particularly in the tech space, to hire good tech talent. So I think some level of balancing off will definitely happen. But finally, I know we've spoken about this a little bit, but what do you think are some good practices that organizations can follow to prevent layoffs?
I think people know it. Whether they can do it, they have the intent to do it is the question. So my view is that first like we sang, so you'll need to have that intent that can you share the pain of the employee you're letting go, right? So I think that's the key thing, that if you can really communicate well, clearly give enough time for the employee to find the next job if you can, pay them enough beyond what the legal requirement is. Can you take care of things like insurance? So I think it's about providing time and empathy. And I also think the care that we take to hire people, 3 rounds, 4 rounds interviews, whereas we will do a one-liner while letting people go. If we can adopt, not that we can meet 3 or 4 times to meet an employee, I'm sure we may not be capable of handling that, but I think the same care is required while you hire to even to let go. I think all the managers have a span less than 10. Even if they have to fire all 10 of them, I'm sure they can find that half an hour to spend time with the people. I think that's a great starting point to give that half an hour to the employee you're letting go.
Correct. No, I think so. And also I feel that when you're hiring, I think people should be more cognizant around you hiring for increase in productivity, because I've seen a lot of organizations where they've raised much more money than they wanted. I recently came across a company that raised 50 million, and I wondered why they required all that money. But then they go on a hiring spree. But are they cognizant of the fact that will each person that they hire be truly productive, or is there going to be so much of overlap and then they would struggle at some point in time? So, well, all in all, thanks so much, Kamal. It was a great conversation, and I think yes, it's time we all made peace with layoffs and losses. But yes, some great nuggets of wisdom out there, and thanks so much for your time and the conversation.
Hey, thank you, Thomas. Thanks for having me, and all the wonderful things that you said about the context of layoffs. And I definitely say, would like to believe that layoffs are here to stay, and let all of us make peace with it.
Right. Thank you.